Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and today's presentation is about audience considerations. Now, I know that not everybody watching this video is going to be doing public speeches for money, or maybe doing speeches every day or every year or every month or whatever your situation is. But it really relates to all of us as it pertains to us really recognizing that we're communicating all the time. And sometimes, whether or not we're doing public speaking and making money, or doing public speaking because we have to give a presentation at work, or whether or not we have to convey ideas to the people that we work with, or maybe we go to school with, or even in our own family units, whatever the situation is, we always have to consider the audience. And if you want to get the best results in your communication, which should always be the goal, people need to be able to receive the communication, you have to remember who your audience is and be able to address them the right way so that you get the best results possible, or maximize the outcomes of your communication. So some of the things that we're going to talk about in this video are really considering the setting, making physical arrangements, protocol, rituals within the organization, the occasion itself. Of course, you have to always consider the demographics. Who are you specifically talking to? And so in that, consider ethnic, cultural identities, religion, group membership, gender, age, sexual orientation, education. You want people to really understand you, and you want to keep their interest by recognizing who it is that you're talking to. Value orientation is a very important aspect of being able to understand who you're talking to. And so we'll talk a little bit in this video about ultimate values and everyday values, and things for you to consider, of course. So topic orientation, of course, really matters, and then audience behavior, and I'll introduce you to some terms called stimulation effects, patterns of audience interaction, and then some different types of audiences. So as we get into this, you really have to consider the occasion. So you have to understand the time, place, and speech length. You also have to really recognize that there are different ways to arrange rooms. Sometimes you have the ability to change the room, or sometimes you'll be in an auditorium and things are just seated the way that they are. But each seating arrangement really will affect the lighting, the way the sound is, and the attention that people give to your message itself. So that really is a big consideration. Proximity of your audience to the speaker, you. And then the noise level and setting. So again, you really have to set your communication up for success, and that really means considering where you're presenting, how you're considering, and message, who your audience is, and so a lot of different things. Sometimes you don't have the ability to change the physical seating arrangements. I get that. Sometimes if you're a professional speaker, you actually get to choose the venue that you're in to help be able to rearrange the furniture. I know that when I am invited to do training at locations, I will go an hour or two early, or maybe the day before if that's possible, and make sure that the seating is just right. Usually the talent coordinators, are there to help. They'll ask me what type of seating arrangement do I want, and so I'll describe what I think works best. Sometimes having desks that are just set up in different rows so that people can see me. Sometimes it's a V-shaped arrangement depending on how many people are going to be in the room. So there are a lot of different ways to set things up. I've seen arrangements where there's a T arrangement, or several rows, or a U arrangement. There's all different types of ways. So you really have to make sure that you're communicating whoever is in charge of supporting you, how you want the room set up. Sometimes you don't have any options. It just depends. I've done presentations in huge auditoriums and in very small conference rooms. So every type of organization has a different setup, and sometimes they will rent specific places if they have enough time to make those arrangements. So those things are usually set up by an organizer who's been trained to be talent support. So you really have to consider the setting. Very often in organizations, there are rituals and protocol that you have to really understand. Special rules, habits, rituals, practices. If you do these things at the same places on a regular basis, you start to understand those things. Sometimes you have to ask about it because people won't even think about what those rituals or protocols are unless they're asked to direct their attention towards that. The demographics of who you're speaking to really matter a lot. You know, one of the biggest sayings in business is that the what's in it for me, and it really is the core of giving a presentation. You can't connect with people if you don't understand people. So you really have to be able to understand their vital statistics. Age, politics, and common characteristics. Sometimes I'm not really into politics, but sometimes I'll make a joke, and say things like, we don't talk about sex, religion, or politics, but if you belong to this specific political organization, I'll speak slower. It's one of my jokes to kind of break things down. But if you think about it, you could really offend people, and I never want to offend people. So it really depends. Some people take those things really personally. It's a part of who they are. And of course, we need to be respecting other people for who they are. People are assessed in terms of cultural information. So we have to be able to connect with people. We need to understand what's important to them or what their expectations are. And so that social information is important, and we have to think of those in psychological information. So again, ethnicity, culture identity, religion, group members, gender, age, sexual orientation, education. These are things that are important to people, that make up who people are, and in order to be able to connect with them, you really have to understand where they're coming from and be able to adjust your presentation and your message to be able to meet their expectations. I like the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans. And that really is a powerful saying if you think about it, because it really means you have the power to change your way of being. And your goal as a communicator really is to be able to connect with people. So you have to understand people in order to connect with them. Dr. Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that really is one of the most profound things that I've ever heard in my life, because it really is true. The goal of communication is not to talk. The goal of communication is to find mutual meaning and move people to take action. And we're moved to take action when we feel inspired and connected. So values truly are powerful life guides. They help us really understand what is right and wrong and good and evil, and they are related to some of the demographics that we discussed earlier. So we feel comfort when we feel understood, and that really is important. People to feel safe, we need people to feel connected, and we need to keep the attitude open so that they will receive our message. So you have to understand their attitudes and beliefs and be able to connect with them. There's something called ultimate values that really have to be considered, and the term is ultimate values. Those are large value systems that hold beliefs and attitudes together. Equality is one of these things. So that's the belief in equal opportunity for all. It's about civil liberties, legal rights, responsibilities, citizenship. Orderliness is about law, control, predictability, rational, pragmatic behaviors. And then freedom. Freedom is the desire for an absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint, and it's often a desire for moral self-determination. So these ultimate values are really important. So when you're speaking, you really have to consider who your audience is, what is their orientation towards orderliness, salvation, equality, peace, happiness, freedom, security. These are major broad categories that you first have to consider. So in value orientation, these are really about everyday values. There are slightly more specific value systems. They really are about attitudes and beliefs. It's about really understanding ambition, the willingness to compete, a desire to achieve occupational success, personal achievement. It's about independence. This is the strong belief of individualism, dignity, and integrity. A resistance to strong authority, which is often construed as exploitation. And then altruism, which is unselfish regard for devotion to the welfare of others, and your sense of charitableness. So there really are three everyday values that might lead to inferential analysis. That's work ethic, patriotism, and moral orientation. So really understanding value orientation can help you really be able to connect better with your audience. You have to understand who people are. Understand their everyday values. And sometimes we're attracted to organizations that share the same values. And when you're in a job interview, whether or not you realize it or not, that good interviews are really asking you about your values. And so the more values you have in common, in alignment with the organization, the happier an employee is, and the better that employee is going to be. Usually, because when we feel comfort, we're probably going to be able to get more done because we're going to be motivated. So everyday values include helpfulness, honesty, ambition, independence, altruism, courage, responsibility, imagination, competition, justice, forgiveness. So everyday values truly help us connect with our audience if we understand who our audience is. And then there's everyday values with preferences. Again, work ethic, achievement, pride, economic orientation, patriotism, moral orientation, thrift, reliance, self-expression, social position, racial preference, material things, marriage, law, order, politics. All of these things really need to be understood, and these are things that you can embed in your presentation to help people stay connected with you. So again, when you are presenting a speech or a communication, you have to understand topic orientation. You've got to tailor the topic to the audience. And so sometimes you might do some kind of survey as you're preparing your presentation, understand who's going to be there so that you can really connect with them in the way that you create your speech. So there's something called stimulation effects. And sometimes, and we see it on the television, especially when something big happens, people react in another way. And we call that term mob mentality. And it's kind of a psychological law of mentality that will naturally come into play when people are moved by what they see or what they hear, and it's usually because they feel very strongly about something. So there are some major mechanisms of mob mentality that you have to understand. Sometimes there's anonymity, which produces an inflating feeling of power. Wow, there's lots of people here, now I get to act in this way and nobody's going to know that I did. Contagion this is something where someone says something and then other people get enrolled in it and it becomes infectious. And then there's suggestibility that needs to be considered. Leads to hasty thoughtfulness and rash acts, and so when people are in this mob mentality, people often do things that they normally probably wouldn't do unless other people were doing them. So there is a desirability to be stimulated by sight and sound and making similar motions. So audience behavior is very important to understand and in order to be able to control that. You know, I have never had created a mob by anything that I've ever said. And I teach topics like leadership and diversity. And sometimes diversity is kind of a sticky topic to talk about because you're really getting into what makes a person, and then telling them that they have to be a certain way in order to get certain results isn't always a favorable thing. So it really depends on how you present your message to the reactions that you're going to get from that. So you have to understand patterns of audience interaction. Sometimes emotionality and rationality are create a mob situation. Like mobs, audiences share a group mind. Generally speaking, people will be attracted to an organization or to a specific event, which gives them a common group mind. Audiences rarely regress into adolescence or violence like mobs do, but you really have to understand that things can happen. So you never want things to go bad. You always want to inspire people to do the right things for the right reasons, in my own opinions. It really is kind of interesting to look at these things. So there are different patterns of audience interaction that I want to talk about. Classification of audiences include organized to unorganized, unified to heterogeneous, apathetic to hostile, and then polarized or bipolar. And so polarization is about unusual homogeneous audience attitudes polarized around a particular belief or attitude. So people are strongly oriented towards feeling a certain way about particular topics. Bipolar is exhibiting two polar opposite attitudes and beliefs and behaviors. And then inner stimulation is often presented in polarized audiences, referring to the violent behaviors of mobs. So types of audiences, depending on where you are, you may have a pedestrian audience. This is a temporary audience, and your goal as a speaker is to catch people's attention. Discussion groups or passive audiences are audiences whose attention is already secured or guaranteed by rules of order, and your primary goal really is to hold their attention. And then selected audience members are assembled for some common purpose, but are all sympathetic to you as a speaker. I can remember doing diversity training, for instance, and employees were told they had to come and see me. And they were told they had to come and see me because they weren't doing diversity best practices. They were offending people. They were not teaching the diversity and respecting people on the terms that they really should have. And so they were kind of resistant. And so it's my goal as a trainer and a speaker to really help people feel comfortable and embrace the message as a speaker that I gave. And so I really recognize that with selected audience members that I have to make sure that I make an impression, that I be persuasive, and then I give them direction to where they need to go and the proper actions that need to be taken. So really have to understand that there is a concerted audience. These are members that assemble with a common active purpose in mind, with a sympathetic interest in mutual enterprise, but with no clear division of labor or rigid organization of authority. Your goal is is conviction and delegation of authority, and with an organized audience, this is a group with rigid division of labor and authority, supported by common purposes and interests. Tasks of members are well learned and already assigned. So your goal is simply just to instruct. So you'll have different reasons for your presentation. You have to remember what those goals are and make that your area of focus, because where we focus our attention, that is where we're going to get our results. So in summary, consider the settings, including learning about the occasion, the purpose, and the specifics of the program. Make the right physical arrangements, and you understand the rituals and protocols. Consider audience analysis, which helps you really understand where and how to make the seating arrangements. Demographics are all about understanding the groups in terms of vital statistics, including age, gender, group members, ethnicity, culture, identity, sexual orientation, religion, and education. You can move people when you understand people, and you have to connect with people. So really understand that values really are a benchmark that guides people, and these are about various beliefs and attitudes, and sometimes it's about global values, and it's about really understanding ultimate and specific values and including everyday values. So within a crowd, you have to understand too that people can turn into a mob and be aggressive, and you have to understand how and how to interact with them and what's going to move them to take the right action versus wrong action. And then there really are three specific patterns of audience interaction: polarization, interstimulation, and then feedback response. And so sometimes there really has to be some two-way interacting with people, and so you're recognizing whether or not you're connecting with people and the message truly is getting across. Because if you're just talking but nobody's receiving the message, it's just a waste of time, and that should be always your goal, to customize your message so that people truly are able to understand what your message is and then take the right action. And you do this by getting their attention, helping them pique their interest, a good impression, helping them feel convicted, and then giving them the right direction to take the right action. All right, I've given you a lot of information today, and you really do have to consider all of these things about your audience, because when you do, you're going to get most effective results and you can make a positive difference. Thank you so much for your valuable time and watching this video to the end. I really appreciate it. I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.